This meeting is being recorded. Okay. He was thinking about these.
This is like some people will they all stay very come on, yeah.
Working on the co-op. Power washing the ground space rebuild it.
Oh, you want me to run that all year?
We're live on the TV diary. Right? You are back to the camera. There's about a 1 second. It happened. Got a little twitch in
It's supposed to be.
There you go. That Gary Jones over there. He thought he heard something.
Gonna go for a lot.
Make sure you're.
Everybody can hear me? Everybody in here? Everybody online? Thumbs up. Thank you. Awesome. Welcome everyone to the April 19th meeting of the Rotary Club of Ames, our hybrid meeting number 2. So thank you to all of you that are here. And for those of you that are online, I hope you also feel present. And this is awesome that we can do this. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll have everyone remain standing for a moment. Fortunately, I am not aware of anyone in our club who might need an extra thought or prayer. But if there is anyone online or here that might know of someone, please let me know so that we can make that known to all. Anyone? No, so I know there's a lot of violence in our country these days, so let's just take a moment and how about an extra prayer and moment of silence for some peace. Thank you. And now, this is always the big test. We're going to have somebody who is online welcome us with the welcome song. And we're hopeful that this works because it worked last week. So Louis, if you are available and could unmute yourself, sing our welcome song, that would be awesome.
I'm available and unmuted, and I'm happy to welcome all of you, both online and in person. Welcome to you from Ames Rotary, Nevada, London, or Gay Paris, from far off lands or the USA. We're glad that you are here today. Come back again whenever you're near. Join us and then we'll make it clear. Around the world you will always be welcome at Rotary.
Thank you, Louis. Unfortunately, we didn't hear you here today in person. I did, but nobody else did. So if you missed it, Louis just sang the welcome song. He did a great job. I don't know why, but we're gonna double check what's going on. Yeah. All right, sorry about that. Thank you, Louis. We have a couple of announcements. Number one, welcome to our new members. We have our new members, Samuel Meisinger and Liz Zurcher. Both of them recently joined, and none of them are here in person. Are they online? No, but welcome. Welcome to the club. Next announcement would be around our district conference, which is actually going to be held this Saturday. I was just talking to Park, and Park is actually going to be helping at the Ankeny Marriott this Saturday evening. It's 4:30 to 9 p.m. There were only 140 tickets available for the in-person, and those are available. However, if you're interested, there's still a virtual option to participate. So you can go to the District 6000 website. It's $25 to sign up for the virtual option. And actually all those proceeds are divided between Polio Plus and the Souk Up Safety Homes. So it's for a good cause. I think they're starting with cocktails and dinner. So if you happen to have cocktails and dinner on Saturday evening, why wouldn't you just log in and wave at everybody on Zoom and participate? And actually, I think you all got this email, but Governor Dakin, District Governor Dakin was here last week, and he forgot to mention that our club member, Jeff Johnson, is actually going to be the MC for the upcoming district conference. So you know it's actually going to be exciting. And actually, he will be talking a lot about our Rotary Club of Ames Centennial Project, which is the Miracle Field. So thank you, Jeff. Thank you for volunteering to take part and help MC that event. But there's also going to be an auction, which is another reason to sign up for the virtual option as well. So he says, thank you to all you do for Rotary in your community. So thanks for that message from Governor Dakin. And it looks like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, about 20 are here present. And we are up to 44. So that's a pretty good turnout for our Monday hybrid. Now it looks like we have a couple chats. Let's just make sure that I didn't miss something. Oh, thanks, Jean. Great job, she says. And Randy Peters says Louis sounded fabulous. And we have a great program today and a great speaker. And at this time, I'm going to actually invite Jenny Legates to the podium to welcome today's speaker.
Debra Marquart is a distinguished professor of liberal arts and sciences at Iowa and is Iowa's Poet Laureate. She is the senior editor of Fly Away, Journal of Writing and Environment. A memorist, poet, and performing musician, Marquart is the author of 6 books, including an environmental memoir of place, The Horizontal World, Growing Up Wild in the Middle of Nowhere, and a collection of poems, Small Buried Things Poems. Marquart's short story collection, Bone, Rock and Roll Stories, drew on her experiences as a former road musician. A singer-songwriter, she continues to perform solo with her jazz poetry performance project, The Bone People, with whom she has recorded 2 CDs. Marquart teaches in ISU's interdisciplinary MFA program in creative writing and environment and in the Stonecoat MFA program at the University of Southern Maine. Her next two books, Gratitude with Dogs Under Stars, New and Collected Poems, and The Night We Landed on the Moon, Essays of Exile and Belonging, are forthcoming later this year. Please help me welcome Debra Marquart. If you don't want to hold, yeah, if you don't want to hold this, you can go. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I shake hands.
So nice to meet Jenny finally. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I only knew Jenny by name because I did an event at the library, and I got this bag of books that Anna McCracken asked me to sign, and I think I signed them all to Jenny. And so Jenny has my entire body of work. And it got to be challenging because I'd have to find something new to say with every book, you know. So Jenny, I hope that the group of books that you got that you've been enjoying. I'm going to read some prose to start. I'm probably going to read for about a half an hour or so, and I'll try to tuck a few poems in. Because I am Iowa's Poet Laureate, so I feel an obligation to read some poems, and it is National Poetry Month right now. But I'm really right now kind of the most excited about a new essay collection that I have coming out called The Night We Landed on the Moon. And there really is an essay about the night we landed on the moon. I'm curious if anyone remembers where they were the night we landed on the moon. Do you remember? Do you want to tell us where you were? Where were you, Jenny?
San Francisco, and my car got stolen that night.
See, everyone, you know, it was momentous. I was with my grandparents who had immigrated to the United States from Russia, and it was really something for them to be watching this on television and then go out and look in the sky. So I'm going to read from this essay collection, and this is an essay called Carte Blanche. So I'm from North Dakota. And I grew up in a small town, Napoleon, in the middle of the state. My grandparents and my great-grandparents were all immigrants that came from villages in Russia between 1886 and about 1911. My grandpa Geist was the last one to come over around 1911. And I grew up in an ethnic enclave, so, you know, I didn't know differently, but basically I grew up around these kind of like polka dancing, sausage making, you know, and they spoke a kind of weird fossilized dialect of German. And I'm old enough that I remember we didn't have television. And I remember when we got television, all of a sudden I started to see what the rest of the country was doing, and it didn't look exactly the way we were living. So I'm quite a bit in this essay collection about the changes, you know, that have occurred in my lifetime in North Dakota. And one of the big changes is actually the oil boom. Some of you may know that one of the largest oil finds in North American history was happened in North Dakota, and it's created a lot of changes. And right before they found this oil, they knew it was there, but they didn't know how much of it there was. Called The Horizontal World, which was a memoir about North Dakota. And my whole kind of working premise was North Dakota is such a boring place. I grew up there. I couldn't wait to get away. And nothing ever happens there. Nothing ever changes. And now I'm going to give you like 300 pages on that, right? You know, so I published this book, and it was a fairly successful book. And I just wrote about what it was like to be rural and misunderstood. You know, you leave a place like that, but you sort of always feel the pull of it. It always kind of keeps tugging. So, and as soon as I published the memoir, they found like, you know, I don't even know, what is it, 400 billion barrels of oil or something down there, you know. So anyway, this is called Carte Blanche, and it's really about my dad. It's about when I left home. Carte Blanche. As we were packing with the things I planned to take to college, my father handed me a checkbook from the stock growers' bank. It looked odd and official in his hands, legal even, and nothing like the buckets of milk or the hay bales or any of the other things of agriculture that I usually saw him carrying around. Inside the plastic navy blue cover, tucked into the crease, was a stack of bound checks with my name on it. Use these, he said, to buy what you need while you're away. Over the years, sometimes at the end of harvest or when the livestock was loaded up and taken off for sale, my father would make some vague references to the money he was setting aside for us kids. Let's say money equal to the price of one calf for each of us, in payment for us helping him and mother with the milking and the work in the farm. I don't think any of us ever pinned him down about the details. Somehow in our family, and I'm not sure how this was accomplished, because I don't recall ever being yelled at about it, but we just understood that to talk about money was low and rude. Also, to ask too many questions was low and rude. So it only followed that to ask too many questions about money was not only low and rude, but also. But here was this checkbook in my hands now, evidence that the socking away of calf money had been occurring all those years. Prior to this, I'd lived a cash-only life. I didn't need much. I had a little job waitressing at Maggie's Cafe in high school to buy the luxuries. Then as now, I spent most of whatever I made on three things: books, clothes, and music. Even at that moment when I held my first check, I had no idea how it worked. But once at college, I took to writing checks like a natural, like a real pro. I learned that there were more things in the world to want than I'd previously imagined. Shoes in black, brown, and tan, sandals in low and high heels, dresses, sweaters, skirts, raincoats, umbrellas, hats, makeup, books on philosophy and history, albums for bands that weren't even on the radio. With my new college friends, other girls from small towns from North Dakota, who were all set loose now in the big city is Bismarck, by the way, I also discovered eating out. In Napoleon, my hometown, there was pretty much only Maggie's Cafe and the pool hall downtown where you could still get the best order of French fries ever made for 25. But in Bismarck, there were places like A&B Pizza and the Big Boy Drive-In. I don't think we ever splurged on expensive restaurants, but we skipped out of the college food service enough times to eat our way across town. We all gained the requisite freshman 10 pounds. My monthly bank statements must have read like an ethnographic study of this new creature my parents were discovering me to be, a female college freshman. It would have been better than satellite tracking or inserting a computer chip under my skin, because once I went paper, I don't think I ever learned how to get cash out of that checking account. I mention the bank statement now only to point out two other amazing facts that I didn't know about checking accounts. That a bank statement was mailed out each month and that it was being sent to my parents, who I presume studied it carefully. About 8 months into the experiment, my dad called me up and said, "Well, we're closing down the checking account." "Why?" I asked, incredulous. It seemed to be working so marvelously. That's when I learned about the banks that were coming to my parents, along with the monthly pack of canceled checks, those little numbered slips of paper that I had wildly signed, torn out along the perforations, and strewn across the counters of stores and restaurants in Bismarck. "But I still have plenty of checks," I told my father. And that's when I learned another stunning thing. that money had to be put into the account to counterbalance the writing of the. I don't recall anyone ever mentioning that part about making deposits, or maybe he told me about checks and balances, but it simply fell from my head, like algebra or chemistry or calculus. Even before I understood all the intricacies of banking, even after, I always marveled at the counter checks in the cafe and the stores in my hometown. In the Red Owl grocery store, a drugstore, near the chewing gum and the cigarette lighters, in Maggie's cafe, near the mints and the toothpicks in their cellophane wrappers, there was always a tattered path of counter checks from the stock growers' bank. I want to just stop here and see, do they have these in Iowa, counter checks? They're just blank checks, and they're just kind of on the counter. And so you have to fill in all your information, like your number and stuff like that. They still have them in my hometown. Anyway, I'll always marveled at the fact that they existed. It was from the stock growers bank, and it was always tucked in the crevice between the napkin holder and the cash register. The counter checks were left blank of any information, convenience checks for people who may have forgotten their checkbooks at home. Not only the normal places on the check for the date and the dollar and the pay to, the order of, were left blank. The long line for the signature was left blank, and the spot marked memo where you could write rent or fishing gear to remind yourself what you'd spent money on. But also the upper left-hand corner of the check where the account holder's name and address was usually printed, and the long bottom edge of the check where the account number was shown, these were all blank. It seemed like carte blanche, courtesy of the stock growers bank. It was naive and quaint on the surface, but I soon understood that what keeps counter checks from being an embezzler's dream is the safety net of the small town. The merchant's knowledge of all of his customers, the families they belong to, and what their history has been. A small town is a claustrophobically finite world. Everybody's watching, everybody. And a small town is not a place where you want to start bouncing checks, counter checks or otherwise. It's like fouling your own nest, or as my father used to say, shitting too close to the house. It took me a long time to figure out what that saying meant. About my own derelict checking account, later I discovered a man named Parkus. He would call my father when my checking account ran low. "Debbie is overdrawn again," he'd say. And then my dad would run downtown and deposit a few $100 more. Years later, my mother told me that they would sift through the checks I had written, $1.25 at Dairy Queen, $2.33 at Village Inn, and they would shake their heads. They were paying $5 for every overdraft. Devastated by the waste of it, and I'm certain my father found it hard to fathom why I needed so much in the world in excess of the price of one calf sold to slaughter each year. Everything I think and write about home these days makes me feel like crying, because so much of it is gone, pushed out of the way through the natural forces of time, erased through. When I remember the solemn gesture of my father handing me my first checkbook as I leave home for college, never to return, although none of us knows that yet. When I think about him rushing down to the stock growers bank to deposit $200 more to cover my checks for lipstick or pantyhose, I have to get up and walk around for a while. I have to unload the dishwasher or walk. Because my father has been gone from the world for almost 20 years now, and I doubt I will ever find anyone who loves me as much as he did. And that world of home, that world of checks and balances that he believed in has changed so much beyond anything he would ever have imagined. When I drive through western North Dakota these days, I think of him. Air pits burning off natural gas around the oil wells, burning off natural resources into the already fragile atmosphere, just because no one wants to slow down long enough to collect it. I think of my father. When I see the oil and water tankers navigating slippery country roads and read about the catastrophic accidents that result on the highways, when I hear of pipeline ruptures emptying thousands of barrels of crude oil into a farmer's field, loads of fuel exploding near a small North Dakota town, of fracking fluid and oil and saline water spills occurring almost daily in rural regions where people are dependent on well water, I think about how much this is all going to cost. Because it's a finite world, everybody's watching, everybody knows, and I wonder who is going to step forward to pay for this when it comes due. And I think I have an idea about who that might be. The world my father trained me to live in is not the world I live in now. So I must shed some of my training. To talk about money, about checks and balances, and who's going to pay for all this is not low or rude. To ask a second question or a third question, or even a fourth or fifth question is not, because we have so many questions that need asking. That day, after my father called me at college to tell me he was closing down my checking account, he said he would wait a few weeks until the checks had all cleared. After that, for the next few days, I went on a spending frenzy. I bought toothpaste and toilet paper, rugs and comforters and bed sheets, pajamas and nail polish, shampoo, face moisturizer. I bought chocolate bars and camera film and underwear. It felt like the end. I tried to buy everything that I thought I was going to need for the rest of my life. But it wasn't the end. It was just the end of carte blanche, the beginning of resource management, of life stewardship, of understanding limits. It was the beginning of maturity. And I'm not going to beat myself up about not understanding how money worked. Just recently, a friend of mine told me about how her teenage daughter had asked her for money. And when my friend said, "No, honey, I don't have any money," her daughter said, "Yes, you do, Mom. All you have to do is put your card in the machine and it will give you money." So maybe it's just something developmental that we all must go through, like that period before frontal lobe development, nothing can touch or hurt us. And we think the whole world is just a space left blank for us to write our wishes upon. And it would never even occur to us that someone is running around in the background, cleaning up our messes, that someone we love fiercely is paying the highest prices just to make good on the things to which we have so foolishly committed ourselves. That's that little essay there. Let's see, I see some of the people who are here virtually. It's so nice to see your faces and welcome. I'm so glad you're able to join us. And this is my first live event, so I'm a little bit nervous. I haven't been in the presence of people, like real live people, for a while. My dogs are my real companions in life, so this is so great. Sorry, I'm struggling with this microphone. So maybe I'll just read a couple poems here to sort of finish off my talk. And if you all have questions, I'm ready to answer any questions. This is a little different poem. I'm working on a sequence of poems about Iowa critters. And the Department of Natural Resources, some of you may be on their mailing list. They send out, about once a month, they send out a little newsletter, and they always feature some like little Iowa critter, like the 13-line ground, or the slipper shell mussel, or so I started to get really interested in these little critters. I'll just call them critters because they're just about everything. There's insects and there's mammals and there's reptiles. And so I started writing poems about them. And this one is the least weasel. Has anyone ever had an encounter with a least weasel? They are really ferocious. They are, so I'm going to publish a book of these poems, about 15 of these little critters. And I have someone who's doing beautiful little line drawings, illustrations, and then it'll also have a scientific note. So I'll read this one, In Defense of the Least Weasel. This is all research, so everything here is true about this little monstrous, tiny little monstrous creature. World's tiniest carnivore, 8 inches long, 2 ounces. You might think it's cute, but razor teeth, scimitar claws. The least weasel steals the burrows of rats and moles, lines its nest with the skin of its prey, aims for the occipital bone, the base of the skull of mice, voles, and birds. Or it dissects their cervical artery in one quick sever of blood flow. Stockpiles food, or in times of plenty, eats only the brains of its vanquished. Preyed on by coyote, fox, owl, hawk, the least weasel will hiss, shriek, and wail in attack. Come swift and true if you come for the least weasel. Ask the buzzard who scooped up the least weasel in its claws, but failed to execute the fatal puncture. The least weasel twisted the vulture's talons and eviscerated its entrails. Ask the eagle that was accidentally shot by a hunter. When the eagle's fresh carcass was examined by authorities, the skull of the least weasel was found affixed to the eagle's neck. Unrelenting fossilized jaw, sun-dried teeth still dug in, vestige of some previous mortal combat. Even the least weasel still clutching the throat of its killer. Well, that's a really nice little lunchtime poem, isn't it? Wow, that was a good choice. Okay, 2 more. Oh, sorry about that. No, I was just blown away. You know, you do all this research, and then I found this one detail where it was like a little footnote in this DNR report where this eagle had been shot accidentally. Well, it was accidentally, but they went out to examine the carcass. And what they found, that's that image at the end of the poem there, was that the eagle had previously had a run-in with a least weasel, and the eagle had survived, but for the rest of its life, it had this skull of the least weasel embedded in its jaw. And so they examined this fresh carcass of this eagle, and they discovered this fossilized skull that had, who knows how long it had been riding around in the, with the eagle. So it's just a testament to how ferocious these little creatures are. See, I've made someone sick now with this, so I'll stop. 2 more poems. And then if you want to talk about anything, just raise your hand or let me know. Chokecherry. I don't think we have chokecherries in Iowa, do we? I love them so much. They grow in North Dakota, and very particular taste that I remember from childhood. And so this is called, again, I do a lot of research. When I researched chokecherry, I discovered that they are extremely toxic. They're just like the leaves, the roots, even the pit of the cherry has cyanide, is very toxic. And, it makes me marvel that we all survived to adulthood. So this is chokecherry. Carpa. Go in August with sisters down the fly-buzzed dusty rows of the elms, ashes, poplars that great-grandfather planted to slow the wind. Go swinging empty ice cream buckets braceleted on wrists. All summer this ripening, the sweaty cicada hum, and the chokecherry's deadly green drupes turned black cherry, then burnt umber. The skin is tough and tart. It leaves a sandy pucker on the tongue, a catch of grit in the throat. Our maroon fingers thread branches as we heavy the harvest into buckets, the poison carried home to cure, to cull, to siphon in colanders, steam kitchen, and then thicken to jams, syrups. Pint jars stored in root cellar road. The purple stain of summer shored up against winter's long white bleak. Remember how sometimes you'd swallow a pit? Sweet cyanide of childhood, preserved in bones. And then just one last poem. I don't know. I mean, do you look around your house sometimes and just wonder why you're keeping certain things that you haven't used for many, many, many years? And one day I looked at my kitchen wall and I still had that telephone, you know, the telephone that's installed on the wall. I still had it and it was still hanging there. And well, mostly because there's a big ugly metal plate underneath it. So what are you gonna do with that metal plate? So I decided to ask myself this question: why did I still have this phone? And why for my quote unquote landline? Because when I did some research, I discovered that the company was charging me, but there was no landline that even ran into my building anymore. So anyway, landline. Does anyone out there have a landline still? All right, that's good, that's good. Okay, landline. I kept the beige wall-mounted trimline telephone with its pad and south label hanging from its metal plate on my kitchen wall. Long after I had silenced the ringer and disposed of the answering machine, long after I stopped payment on the phone bill, long after I discovered that no dial tone droned up when I picked up the receiver, I never picked up the receiver. Long after I learned that the cable carrying the landline into the building no longer ran into the building, the beige trim line plugged into its metal plate on my kitchen wall. With its curling jump rope cord, which we girls stretched thin into the bathroom, it was our umbilical cord for private calls. Because if the power went out and all the plugged-in telephones failed, because the trim line was engineered to receive current straight through the jack. This is a fact I learned when our neighbor lady was struck by gossiping during a thunderstorm. So if the cataclysmic and always expected solar flare, the really big one, finally hit Earth, or the magnetic poles shifted as they're reported to do every 500,000 years or so, knocking out all cell phones and computers, not to mention ATMs, bank accounts, and cable TV news programs, at least I could pick up the landline and dial that number across my tongue and say, hello, mother, hello, are you okay? So that's that, landline. So much. So I wonder if you have any questions or comments or.
I have.
Oh, Jenny, okay, yes.
Tell us about your life in rock and roll band.
Okay, my life on the road in the rock and roll band. Oh my goodness. I'm writing a whole book about this right now, and I'll try to boil it down. So I was in college. Now you maybe already have kind of ascertained that I was kind of a wild and perhaps a bit of a reckless young woman from my story about the checking account. College and I thought, oh, you know, I'm never going to go back home to the farm, and my dad said you can go to college, but you have to graduate in 4 years, and you have to have a degree that you can get a job when you graduate, right? And I was the first in from my generation to go to college. And so I just chose social work. I don't know why. I didn't know anything about careers. We didn't have like a guide in my high school. And I saw a book in the library. It said, "So you want to be a social worker?" And I was like, okay. So then I went to college and chose social work as my major. And I got to the end of my college career and I did an internship at a state hospital as a social worker. And I realized I am in the wrong profession. I just knew it's a very admirable profession, but I knew it was not for me. What to do? I needed 2 classes to graduate. So what I did was I dropped out of college and I joined this real bad country western band, and I went on the road and we played Holiday Inns. And this lasted sort of the first 6 months of the time when I was on the road. And we played Holiday Inns. And so I was like, I was playing in the Holiday Inn bar at night. I was eating, I ate breakfast in the Holiday Inn restaurant. In the afternoons, I practiced with my band in the Holiday Inn bar. I played in the Holiday Inn bar at night. I went to bed in the Holiday Inn bed. I was like, oh, in the afternoons, I sat by the Holiday Inn pool. I was like, I got it made, And then about 6 months into this, I realized this is not going to work, So I found another band. And I was on the road for about 7 years, to answer, Jenny, your question. And in the middle of all of that, one of my bands, we lost all of our equipment in a fire. Our truck burned. And that's really what started me writing. And I think that that's what started me living perhaps a more contemplative life, where I kind of settled down. I saw that bad things could happen. I started to think about my actions, and I sort of turned. And it was really writing that was sort of central to that turn in my life. And I still play music and I still love music, but writing has brought me along this kind of other course. So thanks for the question. Yes, question. Well, I'm a singer mostly, but I play guitar, and I wish I've been kind of sick my seasonal album, and I would have brought my guitar, but I haven't been able to really sing very much the last 4 weeks or so. But during the pandemic, one of the things I've been working on is getting better on guitar. Because I don't know about you, I've had some time, right? And by the way, my dogs think I'm fantastic. They really do. So we'll see. We'll start playing for real people. It's a question.
How do you get selected to be the Iowa Poet Laureate?
Oh,
what are the responsibilities that come with being that?
Thanks so much for that question. Yeah, I mean, it's such an honor. I'm from North Dakota, and I write a lot about North Dakota. My new book, I do have some Iowa. My new book of essays, I've got some Iowa material, and I've got new poems in my new collection of poetry that are also, I feel I've earned my keep now, writing about Iowa. But there's a nomination process. There's actually a law that was enacted several years ago that sort of codifies the process. And so they put out a call, there's nominations, there's a committee that reviews them, and they get it down to 3, and they forward the 3 names to the governor, and then the governor chooses the finalist. So I was, Governor Reynolds selected me, and I'm just really honored. It's been a weird term because I was appointed in the spring of 2019. And so it took me about 6 months to organize all of these events. And I had about like 30 to 45, library visits, school visits, community things. And then when the pandemic hit, I just had to cancel all of them. So I'm really excited. This is, I think, one of my first, as I was saying, live events. So I'm so excited to get out and see people again and lead some workshops around the state and things like that. So, yeah. Anna, did you have a question?
was just, how did your dad feel about you dropping out?
Oh, they were my parents. So the question was, how did my parents feel? They were mortified. They were just like, they said, you're ruining your life. When I dropped out of college and joined a rock and roll band, my dad would say like, no one will marry you. But kind of a weird little postscript to that, if you live long enough, when I went to my dad's funeral, one of my cousins came up to me and she said, I want to tell you, your dad was always so proud of you that you stuck with music. I just started crying because, the face he gave me was, you gotta, before you draw Social Security, you really ought to have a job that would, he would say things like that to me, And so to know that he was secretly cheering for me, it's just sad. To think about what parents feel they have to do and maybe not express directly. My mother is 93 now, so she lived long enough that we worked out so much. And I had this really weird thing happen with this book of mine, The Hunger Bone. I'll show you what it looks like. I published it in 2000, Hunger Bone Rock and Roll Stories. And I published it in like 2001, I think it was. And I'd published a couple books already and I'd sent them to her and she didn't really ever comment very much about them. So this book came out, I sent it to her. And then she told me later on, she heard about it, that the book had come out. And she went up to Bismarck, to Barnes and Noble, and she went to the counter and she said, do you have Hunger Bone by Debra Marquart? The girl behind the counter goes, yeah, we got. So they go down the aisle to the M and they get the book. And my mother, she tells me all this later, right? My mother's got the book in her hands and she says, my daughter wrote this book. She was a musician. She was on the road for many, many years. She was doing research. So I was like redeemed suddenly, So I often tell my students a story to say, you can change the past through writing, because you can change the story so that people see the story differently. And maybe, my behavior was misparents when I was 23 and I was making decisions according to this deep inner mandate. They didn't understand it. I couldn't explain it to them because I didn't even understand it. I just knew I had to do this thing. And then it took many, many years before I could show them the larger shape of what I had been dreaming and imagining. And, I just want to say that to anybody who's out there, who's listening. Have someone in your family that's just totally mystifying to you, that you're maybe frustrated by, I'm not trying to justify bad behavior, but, try to understand them, I was always the oddling in my family. It was sort of like, where did you come from, And so everyone else was, really practical, very talented makers. They could make things. I was dreamy and imaginative, and I loved music and I loved art. And I sat all day, just read and read and read. And to my family, that was a little mysterious. So anyway, if you live long enough, sometimes you get to explain things to the people that you love. Anyway, I think we're probably out of time, aren't we? Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Very entertaining. I'm sure I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I bet you there's stats out there that say what is the most Googled term in Ames, Iowa today, and it's going to be least weasel. Is what I think. That was a very entertaining story. So thank you. Next week we have Lucy Martin. Lucy Martin, our Story County auditor, will be our program for next week. So same format here. We'll do hybrid for those of you that can come out. If you want to even shoot Karen an email, that's great. We're planning on at least, we get 36 seats at least. Had a nice sandwich, soup, and chips, lunch, and a brownie. For those of you that were wondering, maybe you still have dessert, we had a brownie. And yeah, with that, we'll go ahead and say the four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.